Hello everyone, Ember here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I'd like to do the best Bronzongs of GLC, or I guess the many Bronzongs of GLC really. And this was a suggestion from like 3+ months ago, so I'm like slowly making my way through the list pretty much. But yeah, got a few Pokemon left to go through, and then I'll get to the more recent suggestions. But I might like just put them in a hat and then draw a name out or something. But yeah, today we're doing the many Bronzongs of GLC. So, what is GLC? For those of you who don't know, it's a single prize only no rule box format. It is singleton except for basic energy, and you're only allowed one type per deck. And Bronzong's in this weird spot where nearly all of its cards are one type, metal. However, the most recent one was indeed a psychic Bronzong. So we've got some notable Bronzors to take a look at here. Thankfully, if you're playing the psychic one, then you have access to the very cool art rare. But aside from that, if you want to play metal Bronzongs, then sadly there is no art rare Bronzor, which is a bit of a shame. But you still have access to, evolutionary advantage, which says if you go second, this Pokemon can evolve during your first turn, which is of course fantastic. So, if you're able to find Bronzor consistently in a metal deck, then this Bronzor is absolutely, phenomenal. It's basically a great card. So yeah, definitely elevates a lot of these Bronzongs from like a 5 to a 10, really. So, very, very strong card. But first, we have the Bronzong from Next Destinies. This has the ability Heal Block that says damage can't be healed from any Pokemon, both yours and your opponent's. However, damage counters can still be moved. Interesting wording. I'm not actually sure if this means damage counters can be removed still, or if it's just they can be moved away. It's an interesting wording for sure, but either way, damage can't be healed from any Pokemon. Like if you're not bothering with any kind of healing or potions, this of course is fantastic. But sadly, healing in general isn't really much of a thing in GLC, really. There is some really good options, but really counter going up there. But heal block isn't that good, I would say. Like there's just way better Bronzongs out there. An Oracle Inflict? Oracle Inflict, yeah, interesting attack name. Does 30 damage and then 10 more for each card in your opponent's hand, which can scale quite nicely. That's not the worst attack in the world to have on a support Pokemon, essentially. But I just don't think there's enough healing in GLC to really justify running this Bronzong, sadly. I think there's better Bronzongs, which is a bit of a shame, but still not the worst first card in the Many of series. So, there's that at least. Next up is we have a really strong one from Phantom Forces. This one has the ability Metal Links, which says once in your turn, you may attach a Metal Energy card from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. A fantastic ability, and I guess a bit more consistent than Magnezone, which is a stage 2, of course. However, Magnezone is infinite energy from hand. This is just one per turn from the discard pile, and it has to be to a benched Pokemon, so it's a lot more niche. And yeah, don't think it's as strong. It's definitely not as strong as Matang, really. So it's in that kind of like weird, awkward spot. But if you were able to find this cheaply and it was like your first, I guess, Metal GLC deck, it's not like the worst option in the world, right? For accelerating energy, it's just one of the more, it's one of the worst options. Basically, it's not great. Basically, it's just not great. It's not terrible though either. Next up, though, is we have a Bronzong from XY Breakthrough, and this is honestly my favorite one on the list, just because Pain Amplifier is an interesting attack. For 2 colors, put 3 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon that already has any damage counters on them. And the really interesting thing about this is the fact that metal types don't really have a lot of spread options. Like, you don't really think of metal types having a lot of spread, that's usually just Psychic and Water. So the fact that this is, implying it would have synergy with other metal type Pokemon, well, I couldn't really find any, to be honest, that this would have great synergy with. There is the occasional supporter like Agatha, which can move damage counters across the board and stuff, but aside from that, really, and I guess maybe Gapejaw Bog, if you really want to go all in, or like Potown or something like that, there is options for this. But, it's just a bit odd because there's not really any metal type spread options, which is a shame because, it is a very cool attack and can be quite devastating. But aside from that, yeah, it's an interesting Bronzor though. Next up, though, is we have a one from Fates Collide, and it has the ability Metal Fortress, which says prevent all effects of attacks from your opponent's attacks, well, all effects of your opponent's attacks, including damage done to your benched Pokemon, which is fantastic. It's fantastic. Get a bit of bench power in there. And Guard Press does 60 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, any damage done to his Pokemon by attacks is reduced by 20, which is, it's whatever. It's definitely here for the ability and not the attack. So yeah, definitely a very powerful ability to have, for sure. If you want a bit of extra bench protection, I guess. Is it better than some of the other ones we've looked at already? Debatable. I would definitely rather play a Bronzong with an interesting attack over some bench protection, but that's just me personally speaking. I could definitely see a lot of people really liking this one. So, it's a pretty strong one, to be fair. Next up, though, is we have a Bronzong from Sun and Moon Ultra Prism, which does have annoying Paralysis attack. Paralysis being like one of the best special conditions, really, so gives it a bit of an advantage. But Psychic Renaissance says, or Resonance? Psychic Renaissance? Yeah. For a metal 2 colors, does 60 damage, and if your opponent has any Psychic Pokemon in play, this attack does 120 damage instead, which is way too niche, really. Unless you know exactly what you're playing against. If you know for sure that you're going against a ton of psychic decks, then maybe it's okay. But even then, 120 for 3 energy just isn't that impressive at all. So to be honest, I don't think this is a particularly good one. I would argue this is worse actually than a lot of the ones that we've already seen in this video, So it's a bit of a shame, but this Bronzong is definitely letting the side down a bit. Bit of a shame. Next up, though, is we have a Bronzong from Sun and Moon Team Up, and I'm going to be brutally honest with this card. There is kind of like just a straight up reprint later on in the video, which is, I would just say, significantly better, but either way, it's got the same ability as well. This ability is Heat Proof, says prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's fire Pokemon, which is nice, again, if you know that you're going to be playing against a certain kind of deck. So for the previous one, it was Psychic. For this one, it's, you're playing against a lot of fire, then naturally you'd want to play this Bronzong, right? But aside from that, it is just very, very niche. Shady Stamp, 70 damage, Confusion, nothing too impressive. I will say the artwork is fantastic. I love the balloons. It's kind of creepy in a way, though. I'm not sure if I really vibe with Bronzong in that sense. But yeah, it's interesting, though. And the ability is very strong and can be strong. So yeah, it's cool, but, nothing terribly great or terribly bad, really. Next up, though, is we have one from Sword and Shield Rebel Clash with the attack Gyro Ball. For a metal 2 colors, does 70, and then you switch this Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. If you do, your opponent switches their active Pokemon with one of their bench Pokemon. Now, I'm going to be honest, I've never really seen anything in the way of a metal control deck in GLC at all. However, maybe there is one somewhere. Is that possible? Is there enough pieces to make it work? Because, you could switch into a big tank Pokemon like Copperaja, which prevents your opponent from playing a stadium. Maybe it's another Pokemon that takes a lot less damage from attacks. There's definitely ways of playing this, or, even to something like, not Klefki actually, because I think is Klefki Psychic or Metal? Oh, it's going to annoy me for the rest of the day. Klefki is... Oh, well, my mind's drawn a blank. But yeah, Gyro Ball can switch into anything, basically, that you'd want to put into the active spot, and also forcing your opponent out to switch. So this is basically just buying you more time, but 70 damage for 3 energy obviously isn't that impressive, but, it's an interesting one, though, at the very least. It gets points of being interesting. Next up, though, is we have a one from Battle Styles, and this one I do have a soft spot for because there's 3 different rarities aside from the main rarity, which is really cool. So you do have plenty of options if you want to upgrade the rarity of this one. But it does have the very strong ability Metal Transfer. It says, as often as you like during a turn, you may move a Metal Energy from one of your Pokemon to another. So why this can be pretty good is you can combine it with stuff like Cheryl to heal all damage from your evolution Pokemon, but Cheryl would typically discard all energy attached to your evolution Pokemon. So what you can do is just move all the energy to a basic, play a Cheryl, heal all the damage from your evolutions, and then move it all back, basically, at the end of your turn. So yeah, this ability can be very strong, if you have an attacker maybe, like Copperaja takes a hit, but has a lot of energy attached to it that you don't want to waste, you could move the energy to a new attacker, switch into it, and then swing with that one. So I do think this one is very playable. It's maybe better than some of the other ones we've seen. Well, I think this is actually better than the one that accelerates just 1 energy from the discard pile, because at this point, at least, you can conserve energy for attackers, and I think that's worth it, to be honest. I mean, the attack is just shockingly bad. 70 for 3 is painful, but the ability, very, very strong, and the rarities are very much appreciated. So yeah, probably best Bronzong on the list, to be honest. Next up, though, is we have a one from Astro Radiance, and this is basically just the reprint that I mentioned earlier. Has the ability to Heat Proof, prevent all damage done to his Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's fire Pokemon. Yeah, okay, cool. and then Hammer In does 100 for a metal double colors. So yeah, it's a bit of an upgrade from the previous one, I guess. The artwork is amazing. I love the artwork, but it's not really like one of those things where, not the wrong way. If if you didn't have this one and you wanted to say play this one for the confusion, or like maybe you prefer the artwork, or maybe this one's easier to get a hold of, like at least there's not. I'm going the wrong way again. At least it's it's not like a major issue, depending on which one you play. Like one does 70 confusion, one's doing 100. There's very little difference between these two cards. But aside from that, I think both of them are pretty fun and the artwork is lovely. But yeah, it's just a wee bit too niche. And it's unfortunate the two Bronzongs have to have the same ability for GLC. But moving on, though, is we do have a one from Lost Origin. This one has the attack Gravitational Drop, or Grav Drop as I call it, for a metal double colorless, does 40, and then 40 more for each colorless in your opponent's active retreat cost. This is quite powerful, actually. If you get to 3 retreat costs, you're doing 160. Not bad damage for 3 energy, pretty respectable. There is stuff like, what's it called? I cannot remember the name of anything today. Calamitous Wasteland, that's it. The stadium that increases basic retreat cost by 1 color. So there's also stuff like Gather Mine, which increases it by 2, I believe. So, there's a lot of options here. I don't think there's any metal Pokemon with abilities that increase retreat cost, sadly. At least not ones I can think of off the top of my head. But at least there's stadiums. There's that new item for, I think it's Stellar Crown. It might not have been Shrouded Fable. The one that increases retreat cost for both active Pokemon. So, or at least your opponent's active. So there's at least a chance there, basically, to increase damage from this. So there is options here, and there is other gravity drop style metal type attackers. So maybe there's a deck to be had out of this, but, it seems pretty interesting at the very least. Not complete bulk, it's fun. Not lastly, actually, we've got Scarlet and Violet Obsidian Flames. There have been a lot of Bronzongs, by the way, a ton of them. We've got Scarlet and Violet Obsidian Flames, has the attack Oracle Press, which is okay. And then Extra Sensory does 70 for 2 metal, but if you have the same number of cards in your hand as your opponent, this attack does 90 more damage. 160 for 2 metal is impressive, right? That is a lot of damage. However, you do have to have the same number of cards. So you will have to play a Judge, you will have to play a Marnie, then thin 1 card. You will have to play an N if you both have the same number of prize cards. Maybe you could play like a Roxanne and then thin your hand down. There is ways of getting there. And it is a lot of damage, right? But, if you're not doing that, then 70 isn't that impressive. Like, it is okay in the earlier game just because you can KO some evolving basics very easily and very cheaply. But aside from that, it's nothing too impressive, and Oracle Press just isn't that impressive in of itself. So it's a bit of a weird Bronzong to talk about, really, because in theory it can be pretty strong. It's just nothing that amazing, really. Doesn't stand out too much. And then we have Scarlet Violet Temporal Forces. So yeah, Bronzong's been around for a long time in the TCG. Gets a lot of attention. Then it has the attack Evolution Jammer, which does 30 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, they can't play any Pokemon from their hand to evolve their Pokemon. This is really annoying. Like, it's just straight up a really annoying attack to play against. It's annoying to play against in Standard. It's very annoying to play against in GLC because there's so many important evolution Pokemon. I'm kind of like struggling to find ways to diss this card basically and find things wrong with it. But because it's the only Psychic Bronzong that we have right now, it also like gives you a lot of, it doesn't really give you a lot of choice, I would say, actually. I mean, Metal type Bronzongs, you got plenty of choice as to which one you play. But if you really like Bronzong and you want to play Psychic, then this is your only option, I guess. So yeah, it's a bit unfortunate because Evolution Jammer just isn't a very fun attack to play against, and I wouldn't want to play against this guy, but, it is a very strong card in fairness, so yeah, very annoying card. But yeah, thank you for watching. I do a new set review for GLC with each new release, so subscribe if you're interested in being updated. This is now a series to stay, so let me know which Pokemon you'd like to see. There is a list, but getting through them, and a playlist has been made for the series. As of recording this video, the last one that I will release will, I think, have been Lantern, and the one before that was Milotic, but I did make several mistakes in the Milotic video, so I'm looking to be a bit more careful moving forward. But, if there's been any mistakes in this video, do let me know, and, if it gets to the point where there's just, like, a ton of mistakes in every video, then I'd probably, like, take a break from the series or something. But the fact is, there's a lot of Pokemon to get through and cover, so I'm happy to do more of these. And however, if you want to dive into the competitive side, Omnipoke and the Format Creator Tricky Gym, have both done fantastic videos and guides for each type. I'd highly recommend checking them out. So, if you're interested in learning more about GLC, then I would definitely go, check them out. But yeah, spin out power. Either way, let me know what you think of Bronzong down below. You'll be adding him to your GLC deck. And yeah, thank you for watching.